come on, how much of a fucking hypocrite do you got to be? He wasn't watching like The Dark Crystal and beating his dick. He was in a porn theater. That's what you're supposed to do there.
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down the Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane kicked out.
Welcome back to Shat the Movies, the podcast where we ask, were the movies we loved when we were growing up really that good? Have you caught yourself thinking, why don't they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday night searching for the perfect movie rental at Blockbuster Video? Do you know what Blockbuster Video is? If you answered yes, then this is the podcast for you. I'm your host, Gene Lyons. Alongside me are my two co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And Kerri Gross.
I'm a loner, Dottie, a rebel.
And together we're going to take a look back in time and decide if our favorite films still hold up. Each week, the audience selects from 6 movie choices, and we break out our race car VHS tape rewinder and watch the movie that tallied the highest number of votes. At the end of the podcast, the three of us provide the audience with a number of wipes each movie would take to get off our respective bums. So find a comfortable spot on the sofa and accompany us for a journey through our vast VHS movie collections. If you'd like to download Shat the Movies, you can find us on iTunes, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Pandora, TuneIn, Spotify, or wherever fine podcasts are found. Big D, what's our movie this week?
Well, this is a movie that's been a long time coming. I think when we first started the podcast, we talked about this as being one of our early ones. It's come up in multiple votes. Kerri has been pining for it for the year that she's been on. And finally, one of our longtime listeners, Carmelita from California, said, let's just do it. She called in, made a donation. So we will be doing the Tim Burton 1985 classic, Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
And it should be said that Carmelita, not just a one-time donor or commissioner, and not just a listener, but she has been a persistent donor for the whole time we've been doing this podcast. Just an exceptional support of the podcast and someone we value a lot.
Yeah, and just to give you an idea, because whether you give $5, $10, we appreciate it. It helps us keep going. But she gives a little bit each month, and she's been a consistent donor, and we've really appreciated her. So when I contacted her and said, hey, listen, you don't have to give anything above and beyond. You've more than paid for a commission. She's like, well, you can't stop me. And she ended up giving more in addition that month than most people pay for their own one original commission. So Carmelita, you are one of a kind. We truly appreciate you. And yes, you rock. So normally we ask people to write in what are their memories. Why does a movie mean so much to you? And Carmelita was kind enough and she left us a voicemail. So we're going to get to hear Carmelita in her own voice tell us why she picked this movie.
Hey, this is Carmelita in California. Thank you for accepting a commission on Pee-wee's Big Adventure. I'm a pretty cynical person, but the realities of life have not led to a snuffing out of my enjoyment for the whimsy of Pee-wee Herman. I saw Pee-wee's Big Adventure when it first came out, loved it. I mean, what's not to love, right? It's this hero's quest with the unlikeliest of heroes. I think Pee-wee Herman he's really cool precisely because he's not cool, but he's marching to the beat of his own drum and he doesn't give a shit who likes the tune. He's just kind of doing his own thing and it's weird and over the top and it's hilarious. I was a weird little kid. I grew up to be a weird adult and I just really love this movie. I'm really excited to hear what you guys think about it. My fingers are crossed that everyone will have positive Shat scores, but if you guys don't love it as much as I do, I'm not going to hold it against you because Shat the Movies is awesome. Thanks again, guys. Bye.
I think I agree with Carmelita's voicemail like 100%, and that's why I put this movie on my pick of movies, and I'm so thankful that she commissioned it because I was afraid that it would never get voted in.
I don't think with the cast of this podcast, with anybody who's been on this podcast, you can poll any of us and ask us about Pee-wee's Big Adventure and not know that everybody on this podcast is going to love this. I don't think normally I don't like to spoil the Shat scores here, but knowing us and just the personalities, we're a lot like you, Carmelita. This is a movie that's right up all of our alleys, and I was so excited to see that we were doing it. In fact, the only question for me is what was everyone going to have to say about it? And that was kind of the joy of watching it again, was just looking at it from a critical viewpoint, which I've never done before. I've always just looked at it from sheer enjoyment. And I've actually, oddly enough, never seen this as an adult. So it was super exciting to do.
Yeah, I mean, I've known my score before watching it for reviewing purposes, that I knew what it was going to be because it's one of my favorite movies. But it was a different experience to sit down and break down, each plot point and jokes and things like that. So it was a new experience for me, even though I've seen it 100 times.
So speaking of the plot, if you haven't seen Pee-wee's Big Adventure or need a refresher, it's a 1985 American adventure comedy film directed by Tim Burton in his full-length film directing debut, starring Paul Reubens as Pee-wee Herman. Reubens also co-wrote the script with Phil Hartman and Michael Vaughall. Described as a parody or farce version of the 1948 Italian classic Bicycle Thieves, it's the tale of Pee-wee Herman's nationwide search for his stolen bicycle. The film was released on August 9th, 1985, grossing over $40 million in North America. It was nominated for a Young Artist Award and spawned 2 sequels, Big Top Pee-wee in 1988 and 2016's Pee-wee's Big Holiday. Its financial success, followed by the equally successful Beetlejuice in 1988, prompted Warner Brothers to hire Burton as the director for the 1989 film Batman. So we all kind of grew up with this. I think, Big D, you were the eldest when this came out. So where were you when Pee-wee's Big Adventure was released in 1985?
So I was about to turn 12. I can remember this was on a day where we'd sneak into the movies and we'd hop around Mamaroneck Playhouse 4. It was the same weekend. Now, I didn't remember this, but I looked it up. It was the same weekend that My Science Project, Real Genius, and Summer Rental came out. So I know that we jumped around and watched it then. And like you said, this is a movie you just remember. But going back in 85, no one knew who the fuck Pee-wee Herman was. So I'm trying to throw myself back there as a 12-year-old kid coming into a movie about a stolen bicycle, and it opens up with these fucking dreams, and it's wild, and you don't know what to think. I must have been like, what the fuck is going on?
So, Big D, I think we all remember Real Genius. It's a pretty popular movie. What the fuck was My Science Project and Summer Rental?
Oh, I will tell you. Summer Rental is with John Candy. It's where his family, I think, is going on vacation, and they rent a house. My Science Project is one, again, my time travel movies. And what they're doing is they're making like some kind of, I don't know what the intention was, but it turns into a portal. It opens up like a gateway in the gymnasium, and they have to go through different dimensions. And it's a shitty time travel movie, but I loved it.
I feel like you should just be picking all the movies from now on because I need an education on any of these movies, apparently. Kerri, you're the youngest of the podcast. Where were you when Pee-wee's Big Adventure came out?
I was -2, but I definitely grew up with Pee-wee Herman. I watched the movie as a child. I watched the television series. I have vivid memories of my dad impersonating his voice. And still to this day, a lot of the jokes that I have between my dad and I are like Pee-wee Herman puns. I had a Pee-wee doll. I had a cherry doll. And in my early 20s, I even decorated like my first house very Pee-wee-esque I had red walls and black and white floors and a seafoam sofa. And in 2010, when they did the HBO like stage revival show, I drove out to LA to see it. And I actually sat between Andy Dick and Corey Feldman. And it's still hands down one of the greatest performances I've seen and like an amazing memory.
Sounds to me like that's the one situation in my life I would want antibacterial, like that fucking hand sanitizer.
I was going to say, if a show is enjoyable and you're sitting between Andy Dick and Corey Feldman, that's got to be one hell of a show. I can't think of two people I'd rather not sit next to.
No.
Andy Dick was super drunk and yelling out like bullshit during the whole show. I thought they were going to ask him to leave. It was nuts. And then Corey Feldman had the haircut he probably still has now, where it was like really hipster and then one long hair dangling from the front like an anglerfish. The show was so good that I wasn't distracted by sitting between these two assholes.
So Corey Feldman clearly is just crazy. Andy Dick, though, how much of it was alcohol? How much was cocaine?
Oh, I'm sure it was cocaine.
Did you share your smuggled pipe with them?
No, but listen to this. So I didn't pay for the upgrade for the meet and greet afterwards. And so they escorted everybody out. But if you had one of the original tickets, you got to walk down to the main floor. They put these folding chairs and you had like a meet and greet on the stage with him. So they escorted us all out. And I told the security guard that I had lost an earring and then I needed to get back in there. And he believed me and he let me go back in to look for my earring. And I got to stay and sit in on the meet and greet.
It's an absolute miracle that we get along because that kind of situation makes me so nervous. I'm just like, no, rules are being broken here. So the strange thing about Pee-wee's Big Adventure for me is I saw this movie when I was 5, like when it came out in theaters. And then I think I might have seen it again when I was 8. And I was thinking back as I was watching it for Shat the Movies and realized that might have been the last time I saw it, which terrified me because I remember everything. And I can't remember anything about being 8 years old. But this movie has some bizarre, mystical ability to stay completely fresh in your mind where I remembered every character, every transition, pieces of dialogue. It's terrifying.
Yeah, I don't know what it was because like I'm the same way. It has to have been 25 years that I actually sat through it. How the fuck? What space in our brain is Pee Wee Herman taking up that we could be doing something else with?
I think it's like Teletubbies with children or Elmo. Like they had it wired in. They're like, all right, we're going to raise an entire generation of fuck ups with this movie.
Fuck yeah.
All right, Big D, let's roll that trailer.
Warner Brothers is proud to present the story of a guy
Good morning. I'm here.
and his bike
James Bond kind of stuff.
together for the first time in their first big movie.
I meant to do that.
I say we kill it.
I say we let him go.
Merry Christmas!
Pee Wee Herman is Pee Wee Herman.
Hello!
In Pee Wee's Big Adventure,
Be sure and tell him Large Marge sent ya.
Pee Wee Herman's prized bike is stolen while he is shopping at a mall. Pee Wee thinks his neighbor and enemy Francis took it and confronts him. Francis, who did indeed pay to have someone steal the bike, is frightened by Pee Wee's relentlessness and then pays to have it sent away. After holding an unsuccessful meeting to locate the bike, Pee Wee angrily rejects bike shop employee Dottie's offers for help.
Okay, so I'm again, I said before, I'm trying to think of myself back in 85. I don't know who the fuck Pee Wee is, but this movie is set up so that we should hate Pee Wee. He looks strange, his inflection and his vocal style is bizarre. And then I started finding myself asking the typical questions like, how old is Pee Wee? Is he a kid? Is he a teenager? Is he a strange adult? Where does he get his money from? In the beginning, I started getting scared because I didn't know I was going to be able to take an hour and 40 of Pee Wee laughing.
I watched some clips of Paul Reubens' first appearance as Pee Wee on an old comedy show in the early 80s, and it's almost unbearable to watch it. It's like a 15-minute clip where he goes out onto the stage and he's like, I've only been a stand-up comedian for 2 weeks, and every other word out of his mouth is, okay. And you have to watch it. It's very annoying the first 2 minutes, and then you're like crying, laughing the rest of the skit. So I think that's what he does, is just kind of throws this really obnoxious, annoying, childlike character in your face that you despise and then come to love.
I didn't know the origins of the character either, but you're right. It was a Los Angeles-based improvisation team called the Groundlings, and they said, create a character that you would encounter at a club. So he is this annoying patron of a comedy club. Somehow that worked. Then he started playing him as a real character and got himself on the dating game. And in 1979, he made 3 appearances on the show and actually got picked for a date. Then in 1980, he was in Cheech and Chong's movie where he plays a hotel clerk, ironically. But that somehow led Warner Brothers to be like, yes, this is the next big thing. We got to put this guy in a movie. But I was like, who the fuck is this guy?
Well, Paul Reubens had been one of like 22 finalists that were chosen to be the original regulars of SNL. And he actually lost to Gilbert Gottfried. And I was reading an interview where he thought his career was over because of that and he was going to leave LA. But before returning home, he remembered the idea of his stage act. And it later got picked up by HBO, which at the time was more like of an adult humor rather than what would become the children's television series. So there's a lot of really great clips of all of that stuff before it became, Pee-wee's Big Adventure and Pee-wee's Playhouse.
The thing with the children's show is what really blows my mind is because I watch this and I get that he's a childlike character, but I would never sit down a child and be like, watch Pee-wee. This seems like a really good idea. And I feel like Paul Reubens never like really even wanted that. I mean, great, it's a paying gig and stuff, but I feel like it was an unfair thing that was placed on him. And I didn't realize that the time between him becoming known as Pee-wee and the time that he got arrested for masturbating at the adult theater, I thought it was like 20 years separate. This is like 5 years between this movie coming out and him getting, arrested. And I feel like it probably wouldn't have been such a big stink if he wasn't like a children's actor, if it was just some actor who got, arrested for masturbating, probably not that big a deal.
He did an interview for South by Southwest, and he was talking about how he went out of his way to never be seen out of character, to just really drive home that this was, his work and his character. And that the only time he had been photographed out of character was actually his mugshot, and how detrimental it was to his career. And he even states that in the interview, that had it not been that he was known as a child TV show, it would have been totally appropriate for the adult comedy that it was. You know what I mean?
Come on, how much of a fucking hypocrite do you got to be? He wasn't in a children's like movie whacking off. He wasn't watching like The Dark Crystal and beating his dick. He was in a porn theater. That's what you're supposed to do there. Any parent that would come down and say, I'm not watching Pee-wee because this man was masturbating. Fuck you, Dad. You're off at night beating off two to your Playboys. Don't be a hypocrite.
Yeah, that's the thing. If Pee-wee Herman had become a thing in 2005, this wouldn't have been an issue. You just watch internet porn and jerk off at home. Like, he didn't have the option. It was 91, and he was coked out of his mind.
He was arrested with every other man that was in that theater. There was, I think, 4 or 5 men that got arrested. So it wasn't like he was in a regular theater. Not that I'm trying to justify someone exposing themselves, but in what other circumstances would you find that appropriate,
What the fuck is the business model? Why do you think that theater's open? There's not like porn connoisseurs that are there like, oh, look at the lighting. I just love what they've done with the plot development. It's there for dudes to whack off.
And not to beleaguer the point, but I know that a lot of listeners are going to say, well, what about his child porn charges years later? It's important to note that everything that he had was like vintage, kitschy sort of memorabilia stuff. He said in another interview, he's like, you might think of me as weird or sick or whatever. Just don't think that I'm titillated by photos of children. Like, that's not what this is. It's, I had a bunch of weird, like he had a lot of weird shit in his collection, but none of it was like current, like video child porn. It was like weird fucking knickknacks and shit from days gone past that sometimes had people who were like underage in it. Again, not saying that that's okay, but just saying that people made him out to be a monster. And I think if this had happened, if he had hit his heyday 20 or 30 years later, this never would have been a big deal.
Yeah, the photos were like tintypes from the early 1900s. They seized over like 300,000 photographs, and a few of them happened to have children. Not all were, pornographic in nature. But he, took responsibility for that by pleading guilty, paying a fine, and having to register as a sex offender rather than dragging it through the courts, and he just let it go.
One of the really interesting things was after his arrest, he actually offered the sheriff's department. He's like, I can do children's programming and stuff for you guys if we could just make this go away. And they were like, no, thank you. We're fine. So getting back to the movie, you mentioned, Kerri, that Paul Reubens in the Pee-wee character, had a tough go and then finally kind of caught on that the first few minutes of his performance on stage didn't really get you. And then it kind of hooked you. I feel like that about this movie. The movie opens with Pee-wee in his house. He's by himself with his dog. There's the big Rube Goldberg machine. He's and just having his good time or whatever. And Big D, you and I think agree on this. We were excited to see this movie, and I'm immediately getting annoyed. I'm like, is it going to be an hour of this? And thankfully, We get to the bike shop and it's like a different movie after that. And again, people often quote the initial scene with Francis. I was like, oh, please make this stop. And as soon as he starts talking to Dottie, and I saw that clown that he walks up to, I'm like, okay, here we go. This is the movie I know and love.
Yeah, I found myself in the beginning being like, what is he doing? He's playing with the toys. He's got the fish tank window, and then he starts going la 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 la. And I found myself doing it. He's got the microphone on the fucking his bike. There's something so bizarre. Traditionally, when we have a dream sequence and the person's being woken up, Pee-wee, we can hear the alarm clock going off. The person comes out of the sleep. Everyone in Pee-wee's dream of that little fake Tour de France, all his dream characters get it. They're like, oh, dream's over. They start packing up and just running away. And at that moment, you know you're in for something different. So I gave it a chance because of that.
I should take back one point, and that's regarding one scene prior to the bike shop that is amazing, and that is the bike. I had forgotten how majestic I always knew it was a cool bike, but when it comes on screen and he does the good morning, I'm here, and I'm just looking at that bike, it is so fucking cherry. That loudspeaker, with the tiger head on it. I had one on my bike. It wasn't a tiger head, but it was a loudspeaker. But I love everything about that scene, and every bike joke they do, every bike gag in this movie is just perfect.
In 85, that bike was not cool. We are an adult now. You like to have vintage furniture that you bought from guys because it has a story. In 85, you were like, shit, I want a BMX bike. I don't want this cruiser, but it has everything, like you said. There's buttons you don't know what it does. It's got the loudspeaker. It's like the rest of the movie. It shouldn't be cool, but it is. So I will say that Danny Elfman and Tim Burton, when we did Edward Scissorhands, that I thought the music drove me fucking nuts. This music is infectious. You hear it once in any of the multiple variations and instruments that they play it in. This soundtrack and this score matches and pairs the movie perfectly.
Yeah, this is the first collaboration between Tim Burton and Danny Elfman. And, Paul Reubens had a bit to do in that after he'd been to an Oingo Boingo concert. But Elfman had actually no formal music training and later said that hearing his music performed for this movie by an orchestra was one of the most thrilling experiences of his life. And, Elfman and Burton go on to collaborate on many projects together, and it's all thanks to Pee-wee Herman.
Desperate to find his bike, Pee-wee visits Madame Ruby, a phony psychic. Ruby, inspired by the Al and Moe's bargain basement shop across the street, tells Pee-wee that his bike is in the basement of the Alamo mission in San Antonio. Pee-wee hitchhikes to Texas, getting rides from a fugitive, Mickey, and from Large Marge, the ghost of a deceased truck driver.
Before we get into any of the plot that takes, place after this, I have to say the scene where Pee-wee is walking down the alley and is accosted by those thugs, when he just turns around and hisses at them, is pure comedy gold. I laugh every fucking time I see it.
Yeah, seeing his shadow kind of skulking down the alleyway, I started clapping my hands, just waiting for that scene to happen. And again, I haven't seen this movie in 30 years, and I know it's about to happen. And I think one of the great parts about it is Paul Reubens and, more importantly, Tim Burton are paying homage to so many types of scenes we've seen before, but it's Pee-wee doing it instead of these other guys. And for some reason, like you said, Big D, it works and it shouldn't. This should not be funny. I don't know how he sells it, but he does.
No, and in that scene in the alley, one of the actors playing the thugs is Tim Burton.
Yeah.
So it's one of the few times that he appears on camera, but it shouldn't work. And I think one of the reasons it does work is all the people, all the random characters that Pee-wee encounters along the way, they allow the movie to keep moving forward. When he's going cross country and he meets Mickey in the convertible, or he's getting his palm read, if it was Pee-wee alone having to carry this movie, it would be unbearable. But because we get these little snippets of memorable characters, it's almost like we're with Pee-wee along on the journey.
Yeah, the scene where he jumps on the train and is singing with the hobo, and they're singing all the hobo songs, and then the hobo starts singing that really annoying song, and he just fucking jumps off the train. It's so good. I have to say one of my favorite scenes is once he starts this trip and, starts hitchhiking. Have you guys ever hitchhiked or pick up a hitchhiker?
Fuck no.
Hold on. So like, I think that seems like an out west thing. Like in Florida, I would never pick up a hitchhiker, but out west, I don't know why it seems like it would be more of a sensible decision.
I will fucking counter. This sounds like a Florida thing.
No.
We certainly
Florida man picks up hitchhiker.
No, if it was
picks up alligator.
No, if it was Florida man, it would be a guy stops at a truck stop. He starts driving and finds 3 guys in his back seat. One's naked, one has an alligator, and the other one's dressed up like Little Bo Peep.
Now, Kerri, when the cops do stop Mickey in Pee-wee, when I'm watching that scene, I'm like, what the fuck? This cop is like sexually harassing him, and that's supposed to be funny? Any opinions on that, guys?
It's so weird. It's not funny. But what's even weirder is that once he's dressed in that drag, the convict looks over and gives him like a little winky, like sexual attraction. I'm like, this is clearly not a children's movie, but it is. You know what I mean? It's one of the adult movies did I catch that as a child? I don't think so.
I definitely didn't, but I also found myself also thinking he was kind of cute. So that was really weird.
No, I think it's Pee-wee, whether he is a man-child, he has a way of disarming people. He, in situations where he was with scary people from the fringes of society, whether it's the hobo, it's an escaped convict, whether it's in a dark alley with people who are going to threaten bodily harm, he should be afraid in all of these situations, but he's so naive, he doesn't realize the danger. And when the cop, he didn't creep me out like, oh, he's sexually harassing her. It was almost like it was a grandmother. Like you would see a grandmother with a homemade knitted shawl. He's like, let me just see that outfit. That is just darling. He was not ogling her, and he was not going to just grope her.
This movie does another thing that I feel like I hate in other joke and parody type movies. He asks the convict, what he was in prison for, and he tells him cutting the tag off the mattress. Pee-wee later steers off the road, and they're saved by the convertible top. I feel like those are things that I've hated in other movies like Airplane or Spaceballs that are just executed so perfectly in this film.
We should point out that Mickey, the escaped convict, is played by Jimmy Smits, which is one of the other things that is kind of amazing about Pee-wee is he picks like these more substantial actors who typically do darker roles.
Are you high? Mickey was Judd Omen.
What?
Mickey Smith? What?
That's not Jimmy Smits?
No, that was Judd Omen.
Hold on.
He was in Dune. You don't
on.
remember that? He was in Red Dawn.
No.
Come on, you clown. Yes.
That's not Jimmy Smits?
No, I was like, holy shit, Jimmy Smits looks so different. You're crazy.
All right, so scratching that. All right, so Judd Omen will be my first example. But other than that, you got Lawrence Fishburne, obviously Phil Hartman, who we worked with on this movie. Natasha Lyonne was on Pee-wee's Playhouse. And then one of my favorite actresses who plays Dottie is Lizbeth Daily. And she really makes this movie for me. And then she was also in Valley Girl and other movies that Shat needs to do. So again, lots of talent in this and Pee-wee's Playhouse. Jimmy Smits.
Exactly.
She went by E.G. Daily until like late 90s, 2000s, but she did a ton of those, 80s movies that Gene was saying, but she's also known for a lot of voice acting. She was a lot of the characters in Rugrats, Rocko's Modern Life, and then later did the Powerpuff Girls.
Yeah, like another thing, Kerri, that you said we've hated in other movies is some of that cheesy jump scare claymation. I think we even talked about it in Beetlejuice, that he goes to the well a bit too much. But when he does it in small doses, it works for me. And I don't know why. I feel like a hypocrite that I'm okay with it here. I would just hate it in anything else.
Yeah, not just claymation. We see claymation in the dream sequences. We see claymation with Large Marge. There's a jumping between mediums, even with animation, which I would normally, if you put a cartoon in the middle of a movie, I'm like, no, thank you. But in this scene, when everything goes dark and Pee-wee's out there in the dark with the animated eyes that are kind of moving around, and then when the lights come on and you see all the like taxidermiest animals around him, and it's again, it doesn't need to happen forever. It's like with John Candy in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles with the devil, in the car.
Yeah, exactly.
It's amazing how much this is memorable. And then Large Marge scared the shit out of me as a kid. I had to look away during this scene, and I'm like, as an adult, I'm like, okay, that's pretty funny.
In reading this, do you know the actress? She doesn't blink the entire time she's delivering that monologue.
Oh, Jimmy Smits?
Yeah, Jimmy Smits. Yeah.
At a truck stop, Pee-wee befriends Simone, a waitress who dreams of visiting Paris. Simone tells him about her jealous and large boyfriend, Andy, who disapproves. Andy tries to attack Pee-wee, who escapes onto a moving train and meets Hobo Jack. Pee-wee eventually arrives at the Alamo, but learns that the building does not have a basement. At a bus station, Pee-wee encounters Simone, who tells him that she is on her way to Paris. He calls Dottie at the bike shop and apologizes for his behavior. Andy spots Pee-wee and resumes his attack. So Pee-wee evades Andy at a rodeo by disguising himself as a rodeo bull rider. Forced to ride for real, Pee-wee does well but receives a concussion.
Okay, so I've kind of had a breakthrough during the last block. In movies like Spaceballs, where we're going to jam the radar, here comes a big glass jar of jam. To me, that's not funny. Here, there's some dumb humor, but it's unexpected. When it's not predictable is when I think it's truly unique and genius. All of the Texas humor hits me and just had me laughing out loud. When Pee-wee is on the phone with Dottie and he's in Texas and he's trying to prove Dottie, no, I'm in Texas. And the way he proves it, the stars at night are big and bright.
Deep in the heart of Texas.
That shit is so funny and catches you off guard. Or when he's knocked out and he's the rodeo clown, he can't remember where he is or what he's doing there. And he says, "What do you remember, kid?" "I remember the Alamo." And all the cowboys take their hats off and woo, he's one of us. That shit's genius.
Yeah, what's weird about the phone thing is, again, I'm not just watching it and laughing. I'm actually, when he calls out to everybody about the stars at night are big and bright, I'm like excited for it. And I'm like, I know what's going to happen. I never get excited about a movie when I know what's going to happen. But there's lots of little things that they do in this movie that just nail it. One of my favorite parts is at the Alamo, and when everyone's laughing at Pee-wee because there's no base in the Alamo, and there's just a little kid with a camera that just takes a picture of him while everyone's laughing at him. No fucking reason. And then that line that he drops when he's like, "There's no basement in the Alamo. They don't tell you that stuff in school. It's something you just have to experience."
But I have to commend the actress that did the tour guide. She is literally every guided tour I have ever been on, that entire scene. And she improvised her entire performance.
What was her name? She was in Saturday Night Live.
Jan Hooks.
Yes, she was perfect. But Kerri, we were talking about what your quote was going to be before. It, without a doubt, should have been,
"Are there any Mexican Americans?"
Yes. That or Adobe. Can you say it with me? Adobe.
Unfortunately, on a more somber note, Jan Hooks did die in 2014 of throat cancer. So RIP.
We miss you.
Bouncing right back, no doubt the tour guide was one of the more memorable characters in the movie. For me, Simone really hit home as a kid. I remember as a child when Simone takes the little bit of money out of her pocket and shows Pee-wee that kindness. They go up into the dinosaur mouth and they sit there and they're watching the sunrise or whatever. And I just thought, this is the dreamiest romance. And I want to grow up and meet a lady like her. And as I'm watching this, I'm like, okay, I'm fucking goofy, first of all. But then there's the great writing again where they're talking about where Pee-wee's talking about how everyone he knows has a big butt. And Simone, let's talk about your big butt. And again, 5-year-old humor. I'm laughing about it. And you see Andy outside get really pissed. But Simone was such a sweetheart. One of those characters that doesn't really fit any of the typical characters that we would see in an 80s movie, right? You had the romantic interest, or you had the villain, or you had the ally. And here Simone was like this woman that was a friend of Pee-wee's. And I thought it was really cool, actually, the way that they made Pee-wee relate to different women, where he wasn't looking for, they didn't try to make it like a romance. He was always kind of seeing them as friends. I don't know if there was another implicit message there. That I just thought it was cool that they played his interaction with women in a very supportive and interesting way.
They establish it early on that Pee-wee is almost asexual. Dottie is over the top trying to get him to go on a date. He has no interest. We don't know if he's gay, he's heterosexual. We don't know. It doesn't matter. Pee-wee is asexual. So when he meets you, whether you're a hobo on a train or you're a roadside waitress, he wants to get to know you. It doesn't matter what sex you are.
I don't know if you understand what asexual means, Big D. It doesn't matter if you're homeless or not.
Homosexual doesn't mean homeless sexual person.
I thought it was hobosexual. Isn't it hobosexual?
I feel like somewhere in here there's a domain I need to buy, but I haven't figured it out quite yet.
Yeah, but we always, talking about things that we always complain in other movies, over the top product placement or sponsorships. In doing research for this, I found out that the shop that built Pee-wee's majestic cruiser, they gave them the option. It was a bike shop called Pedal Pushers Bike Shop. They said, we'll either give you 10 grand with no screen credit, or we'll give you screen credit only. The bike shop chose the money. That has to be one of the biggest mistakes.
I don't know. If you came to me and you said, hey, we're shooting this movie and it's about Pee-wee Herman and he does this shit. Do you want the money or do you want the credit? I'd be like, give me the fucking money. This movie's going to bomb. It sounds stupid as shit.
Yeah, I think it's worth the risk, though. 10 grand, you roll the dice. It's a movie. It became even a bigger mistake. In 2014, the original bike sold on eBay for $36,600. So somebody's got this bike probably sitting in their living room. And this would be a great piece of cinematic memorabilia I'd love to have.
You know what I would like? When I was watching this, I was thinking, I wonder who has the bike. But I was also wishing that there was some sort of actual Pee-wee's house to go to. You can actually go to the house that it was filmed. It's someone lives there, and you could do like a star tour and take a picture outside of the house. But you know how at Disneyland you can go into like Minnie Mouse's house and you can like sit and do things in her house? I think that would be awesome to have like a Pee-wee house to go to.
I guarantee if you watch the internet long enough, in LA, Chicago, New York, Seattle, or Portland, they'll do a pop-up of Pee-wee's Playhouse in some restaurant or some club that you can go into. Just give it time. Pee-wee enters a biker bar for one large wine and to make a phone call, but the Outlaw Motorcycle Club threatens to kill him. Pee-wee makes a last request, dancing to the song Tequila. His dance wins over the bikers, who give him a motorcycle for his journey. Pee-wee crashes his motorcycle immediately. Pee-wee wakes up in the hospital and learns from a TV news report that his bike is being used as a prop in a movie starring a bratty child named Kevin Morton. He sneaks into Warner Brothers Studios and takes the bike. Pee-wee is chased by security across the studio lot and through several sets before escaping.
I can barely make it through you reading that plot without laughing at each thing that he does.
But I got to ask again, and I don't want to beat this point to death, but this shit should not be funny. In a writer's room, I'm going to be like, okay, listen. So Pee-wee goes into a biker bar. They threaten to kill him, tattoo him, murder him. Then a female biker threatens to rape him, essentially. And his way to get out of it is his final request will be to dance on a bar to Tequila wearing like 10-inch heels. This shouldn't work. And then they cap it off where he just immediately now becomes friends with the bikers. We don't need to know what happened. He's got his own leather vest. They give him a bike. He kind of wobbles, takes off, hits the sign. And the last we see is he's getting a biker escort to the hospital. How does this work?
Every time I talk to people about this scene, they always remember the tequila scene. They don't remember the part where Pee-wee says, I think we should let him go. And that's the best part of the scene. Yes. But I agree with you, Big D, and it shouldn't work. And I honestly, this was kind of a letdown. First of all, I thought this came a lot earlier in the movie. And secondly, I didn't think that the dance was all as impressive as I used to think it was. But again, they save it because if you didn't like the dance, you got to like him riding the motorcycle into the sign immediately. Yes. Like they're like, no, it's still Pee-wee. Don't forget.
Even though I knew that scene was coming where he smashes into the sign, I still laugh every fucking time. And it immediately cuts to the ambulance. It's so good.
And I feel like such a fucking hypocrite because in any other Roger movie, I would rip that shit apart. That dumb physical comedy, but it just works.
To me, after seeing all the dancing, all the music, all the times that you're shouting along with the script and the movie, I'm like, wait a second. Pee-wee's Big Adventure needs to be treated the same way we treat Rocky Horror Picture Show. Like, how is it not a talk along in the theater every Saturday at midnight sort of movies? This is one of the few movies I could see actually watching regularly and getting involved in that audience participation. It's so quotable. There's so many activities, so many memorable characters. They got to do this. Somebody's got to do this.
I totally agree. I've never been to Rocky Horror Picture Show, but this seems like it would be a much more lighthearted, enjoyable movie to do it to.
Yeah, I petition for that. I've seen viewings of it in theaters, within the last decade, and it's actually playing at our local film bar next month. Maybe I'll just get up and start doing the tequila dance and see if anyone takes suit.
So the bike shop didn't want to be associated with this movie, but somehow they convinced Twisted Sister. Twisted Sister was, in the 90s, they weren't the coolest rock band, but they were still known. How were they okay to be tied to this crazy oddball Pee-wee character. And I just want to say, I did own the first 3 Twisted Sister albums, and I did rock it out to fucking all their stuff. Their stuff is so good.
So the setup is Pee-wee is tearing through the back lots of the studio, and as he's being chased, he comes upon a music video that's being shot, and there's the car, and Dee Schneider's on the hood of the car, like clawing toward the camera, and don't you hear no evil, don't you see no evil. Yeah. So I'm watching it, and I go, man, that guy looks a lot like Dee Schneider. I'm like, that looks a lot like Twisted Sister. I'm like, that is fucking Twisted Sister.
I wish that there was a Twisted Sister music video that had a Pee Wee Herman cameo of him blasting by on his bicycle and in a boat smashing into the car. That would be just full circle comedic genius.
That would be so fucking meta.
One actor that I did not mention earlier in the pod is Jason Harvey. So he played Kevin Morton, the bratty kid. And if he looks familiar, that's because he grows up to be Kevin Arnold's older brother in the Wonder Years. But man, that kid is the perfect brat. I wanted to reach to the screen and like fucking throttle him. And it just added again. I can't express enough, Big D, how you mentioned Paul Reubens can't carry this movie on his own. But man, paired up with other people, it's gold.
Yep, totally.
That scene with the kid brat and the nuns is another example of things that I would normally hate in movies, is how Pee Wee Herman at any moment has a costume change with the platform boots. He's all of a sudden a rodeo dude. He's got his biker vest. And now he's just, you pan over and Pee Wee Herman's dressed as a nun on set. Like, they don't need to explain that to me. It doesn't need to be feasible. And I just still enjoy it. It's so good.
Later, Pee-wee discovers a burning pet shop and rescues the animals. Although the firefighters declare Pee-wee a hero, the police arrest him for his disruption at the studios. Pee-wee meets the president of Warner Brothers, Terry Hawthorne, and explains his journey to retrieve the bike. Hawthorne decides to drop the charges and make a special movie about Pee-wee and his bike, which is returned to him. I gotta ask, why is there a chimp at the pet shop? I'm like, I remember the pet shop. I remember the snakes, great scene. I remember all the little animals getting escorted out. And then it's like, why the fuck does this pet shop have a chimp?
Forget about that. They have a chimp. They have a chimp that responds to verbal commands. He says, hey, you go get the dogs. I'll get these. The chimp follows orders. It unlocks. That is the smartest chimp yet.
Yeah, arguably, Pee-wee didn't need to be there. The chimp could have actually he could have just let the chimp out and the chimp would take care of the rest.
Oh, totally.
Now, Kerri, you mentioned how it would have been great if they had the music video with Twisted Sister and Pee-wee bursting through. I thought the biggest selling point of the entire rampage through the studio lot was when you get to see the black and white footage that the studios put together of like Godzilla, and then you see Pee-wee coming through on the bicycle, everything's exploding. It's just a recap of like, this is what you just saw. You've been so desensitized to it because this movie is insane. Remember, this is what you just saw. Pee-wee Herman on a bicycle riding through a Godzilla set, blowing up miniature tanks as a boat chases him.
No, it just hit me. The movie starts off with a Rube Goldberg machine to make breakfast. The whole movie is one giant Rube Goldberg machine. That final scene, it starts off with a bicycle chase. Then somehow the golf cart gets hooked onto Santa's sleigh. It was a boat. It was like a water skiing boat that then the water skiers get tossed into the snow. Santa gets hooked on. Before you know it, Godzilla's in the sleigh with Santa. It just continues to steamroll and just to add insanity.
Not just Godzilla with googly eyes.
And let's not forget the 2 elephants, one painted blue and one painted pink. No explanation needed, just...
That made me kind of sad.
So I found myself trying to think, why do I like this, but I had issues with Edward Scissorhands? This was Burton's first movie. It boils down to who can carry the movie. To me, Edward is kind of a stale character because he gets to interact with all the town folk in that one small cookie cutter society. We don't get to see him play off of or learn from different characters. If you had taken Edward on more of a road trip journey, I might have liked that. If you put Pee-wee in a role where he's only interacting, which was the original script, it was going to be a remake of Pollyanna. It was to see how Pee-wee would interact with all the town folk. This movie would have been a disaster, and the annoying parts just would have drowned out any of the original comedic, just wonderful moments that we get by it being a road show.
I think one of the key differences, though, between Pee-wee's Big Adventure and Edward Scissorhands is Burton tried to do something that a lot of directors try to do as their career moves along, and that's to add some additional dimensions and depth to the movie. So although this is a very funny movie, I think that Edward Scissorhands was trying to appeal more to a deeper core of emotion at people. And so it was a tougher tightrope to walk. Not saying one way or another. I enjoyed Edward Scissorhands more than this, but I do see what you're saying in the sense that this gave us more variety. It kept things more fresh. Later at a drive-in theater, Pee-wee and Dottie attend the premiere of his biopic, an action movie starring James Brolin as P.W. Herman and Morgan Fairchild as Dottie. At the drive-in, Pee-wee gives refreshments to all the people he met along his journey. Pee-wee also encounters Francis, who accidentally catapults himself into the air using one of the bicycle's gadgets. As Pee-wee leaves the drive-in, Dottie asks why he's not staying for the rest of the movie. Pee-wee answers, "I don't have to see it, Dottie. I lived it." He and Dottie then ride off together at the movie screen in silhouette. I love an ensemble ending to a movie. I always love when they bring the whole cast back, and it's really tough to do and make it make sense. This one was the best because he starts with all the snacks and he's going to all his buddies one by one and delivering, snow cones to the hobos and the hot dog with the file in it, the foot long to Mickey.
Jimmy Smith.
Not Jimmy Smith's. Yeah. And then finally he gets to Dottie with the last, snacks for them. They've got their dogs together. It's very cute. And I like that warm feeling when everyone comes back for the end.
The only thing I would have liked more about this ending is if Dottie and Pee-wee had kissed or something. I mean, they leave it so open-ended. Yes, they're there at the movie together, but it needs to be like a little romantic ending there for them.
Big D, you're shaking your head no, but she's such a babe and she's got that voice and I want to see them together.
Oh, come on. It's unimportant. I think that would have been predictable. The fact that they don't, it leaves it open. You don't know what happened. It's unimportant. I didn't need the romance. But I love the subtle humor that the bikers decide to show up in like a tuxedo version of like their biker outfit. Too funny.
I like that we've been watching this movie for so long that becomes subtle. Bikers in tuxedos. Subtle.
Yeah, you wouldn't have noticed it. Yeah.
In a not so subtle touch, the movie that they do screen again with James Brolin and Morgan Fairchild, which I thought was an amazing touch. For people who don't know, in the 80s, like Morgan Fairchild, she is it, man. So the fact that she was playing the female lead in the P.W. Herman movie, I thought was fantastic. And the parody movie is pretty funny. They got the motorcycle, the X1, and he's got to fight ninjas and stuff. But I would have liked it better if it were just the movie we just watched. Like, I thought that's what they were going with it when they're like, we're going to offer you a movie. And then I realized, oh my God, we were watching the movie. That's what this was. It's like, no, actually, there is another movie.
So for our younger viewers, James Brolin, who plays the James Bond version of PW, that is Josh Brolin's father. So you remember in the Goonies, the older brother, that's Josh Brolin.
For people who say that Pee-wee Herman's just like really loud and animated and everything, and that's what makes him funny, I do want to point out that Pee-wee's role in his own movie, that's he's the highlight of that too. Paul Reubens as the bellhop, just awkwardly interacting with the camera. He's kind of like keeps looking at it and like moving aside. And I love awkwardness on screen and he just fucking nails it. I liked seeing that additional component to his acting repertoire. And if anybody who's seen Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the movie, you see that he could just do so much more than this Pee-wee character. And I really wish the guy got more roles.
I'm hoping, and I think I've talked about this once before, the class in Newcomb High, the Traumaville Classic was filmed at my high school. At the very end of the movie, when the two characters kiss, you can see me, like whatever, 12-year-old me, directly behind the two characters as they kiss. I pull the Pee-wee Herman. I'm staring at them. I'm staring at the director. I go back. That was me. So Pee-wee in this role, somebody out there, please commission it. Class in Newcomb High, you'll get to see me in it. I was Paul Reubens playing the bellhop. That's so real.
Did they overdub your voice too?
They probably would have. You could almost see me drooling, staring at the two leads kissing. I was like, what am I looking at?
Paging Mr. Herman.
Yeah.
Mr. Herman, you have a phone call at the front desk.
Yeah. Yeah. But, sometimes we reference the famous film critic Roger Ebert. Now, even though he didn't cover this movie, I think he summed it up perfectly. He put this on his list of guilty pleasures. And he said, even though I never ever reviewed the movie, Pee-wee's Big Adventures is one of those movies like The Wizard of Oz that kids can look at in one state of mind while the grown-ups enjoy it for a completely different level. The movie is not just a strange little man acting goofy. Pee-wee has created a whole fairy tale universe as consistent and fascinating as Alice in Wonderland or the world of the Hobbits in Lord of the Rings. And I think it's so true. And people who haven't seen this, without Burton getting this break, there is no Beetlejuice. Warner Brothers then doesn't get him to direct Batman. It doesn't start the whole train going. And this one little movie of this annoying little man laughing and just doing a stupid dance. How different would Hollywood have been if this character never existed?
So did either of you ever see the sequel or the 2016 Netflix movie?
Oh, no.
To tell you how badly I didn't want to watch Big Top Pee-wee, I was on a flight and it came on. And this is back in the day where like didn't have choices. It was what was on the plane. And I was like, I'd rather fucking stare at the window than watch Big Top Pee-wee. It was bad.
I think it's one of those examples of just a perfect masterpiece that didn't need a sequel or a spinoff. And I did see Big Top, but when I heard that in 2016 that Paul Reubens was working on, making a Netflix movie, I can't even turn it on. I don't want to see him older with flabby neck.
No.
Trying to recreate these jokes that were timeless in its time, and it would ruin it for me.
And what's sad about that is the director who did Big Top Pee-wee, he did movies like Grease, Blue Lagoon, Flight of the Navigator. So you'd expect it would be a better, like, it's not some bullshit crew here. You got Paul Reubens, Randall Kleister, the director. Like, you'd think it would be better. But I remember, I think 10 minutes into it, realizing this movie is just going to be unbearable. And I didn't see the most recent release either.
No, I have no desire to, because I can imagine they just tried to take the funniest parts and what worked and recapture that. I will actively avoid any other Pee-wee Herman movies. But today I tried to get Emma to watch Pee-wee's Playhouse, but she got a little tired. We did some artwork today. We went to the dollar store, bought some canvases, but I will give her a chance to watch the television, the kids show, and I'll report back on what she thinks.
It is a little weird to think about because I appreciate this movie as an adult. And I remember I really, really liked it as a kid. But I'm thinking now, I'm like, it's not a movie if I'd watch it, I would expect a kid to like, because there's not really a lot in there for a child to enjoy. Like most of the jokes really work at an adult level. I don't know that I agree so much that it's good for kids, but it's got to be because I liked it.
I'm not going to make her watch the movie.
No, I'm just saying the movie for me, I was 5 years old. I thought this is a great movie. Now I'm looking at it, I go, if someone said, hey, what's a great movie for a kid to watch? I wouldn't say Pee-wee's Big Adventure. I'd be like, kids can be bored out of their minds. Again, though it was the 80s, we were pretty desperate for entertainment. We watched Dino Saucers, for fuck's sake.
What the fuck is that?
Dino Saucers was a cartoon about dinosaurs that come down in a flying saucer. They're space traveling dinosaurs that give these power rings to kids. It's fucking dumb.
Makes sense.
Now's the time in the podcast where we give our Shat scores. The way we do that is on the Shat meter. So we're going to tell you how many wipes this movie take to get off your bum. 0 wipes is a perfect score. That's a dunk in Francis's giant bathtub / Olympic-sized pool, coming out so fresh and so clean, sliding across the floor and putting on your comfy robe. 5 wipes is taking a big chomp of trick gum and getting black goo all over your face. Big D, we'll start with you. What's your Shat score for Pee-wee's Big Adventure?
So I got to give it a 1.5 wipe. I mean, it works even though it shouldn't. And I'm going to sum it up in 3 words. It's manic, it's goofy, and it's strange. It marked Burton's directorial debut or his first big breakthrough. It was the first time that him and Elfman got together. It works in so many ways that you say there's no way this ever could. And what it did for the history of cinema and the 80s and Burton, and it is so unique. And the fact that it's so memorable and so universally, I think, loved. I mean, I think it had on Rotten Tomatoes was like an 85. That's shocking. I thoroughly enjoyed it, even though I didn't think I would. The hour and 35 minutes, it just flew by. I would watch it again because I know it's going to make me smile. It's going to make me happy. The lines are memorable. I found myself saying them along with the characters. If you want to do yourself a favor and go back, and a lot of times we say a movie's good, but is it worth it? If you got an hour and a half to kill and you want to smile and remember what it was like to be a kid, I think Pee-wee's Big Adventure is the movie to do that. So 1.5 wipes.
How about you, Kerri Gross?
I think it goes without saying that this is a 0 wipe movie for me. This movie's been on heavy rotation my entire life. I have fond memories of the character. I see it anytime it plays in a theater. I laugh every time at every joke. It's easily my most quoted film, probably how like Spaceballs is for Gene and Roger. You know, a good one to use at work. I'm trying to use the phone, or I know you are, but what am I? Will end almost any argument. If you want to thank a stranger, may I suggest merci bleu bleu? And I can't not do the tequila dance when that song comes on. Overall, this film is very much a matter of taste. And I think it loses a little bit of steam for some people in the third bit, but I think it's genius and timeless, and it's a 0 wipe.
I got to agree with both of you. Dick at 1.5, Kerri at 0 wipes. I'm coming in at 1 wipe. I agree, Big D, there's a manic and macabre energy to this whole movie. Something that people don't realize is there are some legit frantic to the point of out of control scenes in the movie. And also, like, if you notice in Pee-wee's house, like, there's like skeletons in the window. There's a lot of scary things going on in this movie, which I really appreciate. His nightmare sequences are like sufficiently anxiety inducing. There's a lot of hints of Edward Scissorhands in there, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. It's just amplified. It's pushed to another degree. And I think the movie's key strength is that it can play on so many subgenres seamlessly. It switches effortlessly between horror, film noir, comedy, mystery. And as we mentioned before, every new conveyance Pee-wee boarded, and they used a lot of them, you know, whether it was getting in a car, getting on a train, you know, getting on a bicycle, a motorcycle. It just had me clapping because it triggered the memory of what would come next, which character would be introduced next. It was just so much fun. So for me, that's 1 wipe. So between the three of us, 1.5 wipes for Big D, 0 wipes for Kerri Gross, 1 wipe for me, Gene Lyons. That comes out to an average of 0.83 repeating wipes for Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
Okay, so as proof that I don't go back and check these scores ahead of time, that now ties it in the 15 spot with Beetlejuice.
What?
Yeah, ironically enough, both 0.183. Beetlejuice, and I'm a little upset at this, I gave that a 1, and Roger gave that a half wipe, and Gene gave it a 1. I think this is better, but I still can't fault it for being in the top 20 of over 107 movies we've done so far.
Arrivederci, baby.
All right, so that's 0.83 wipes repeating, tied for the number 15 spot. And that brings us to next week's movie. Big D, what do we have coming up?
So next week, the flurry of commissions continues with one from Paul Dixon. In a violent, near-apocalyptic Detroit, evil corporation Omni Consumer Products wins a contract from the city government to privatize the police force. To test their crime-eradicating cyborgs, the company leads street cops Alex Murphy, played by Peter Wellers, into the armed confrontation with crime lord Clarence Boddicker, so they can use his body to support their untested RoboCop prototype. So stick to the trailer, and I think you might have a good idea of what movie we're doing next week, but thank you, Paul.
All right, a lot of great commissions coming up from our listeners. Thanks, Paul, for yours, and Carmelita for yours. We also want to take a second to thank everybody who's made donations to Shat the Movies this year. So quick shout outs to Adam, Ashley, Bradley, Carl, Carmelita, of course, C.M. Elvin, or maybe C. Melvin, Emily Jasper, Greg Reipenhoff, Jan Efert, Jordan, Lucas, Luke, Mac, Martin, Matthew Guy, Mazin Jalili, Rachel Boyle, Rodney Hunt, Shane Partington, and Vince. Thanks, everyone, for your donations to the podcast. Again, if you would like to support the pod, we have many options. You can do it through PayPal, Venmo, or Amazon by going to shatthemovies.com/PayPal/Venmo or /Amazon, or go ahead and take the Shat the Movies survey at shatthemovies.com/survey. That'll allow us to find sponsors that you'd like to hear from. That concludes this week's episode of Shat the Movies. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat the Movies. The Facebook page is shatthemovies.com/Facebook. Website is shatthemovies.com. Our email address is hosts@shatthemovies.com. Email us with your feedback or any suggestions you have for movie topics and categories. We're everywhere fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe. And if you stop by iTunes, please be sure to leave a 5-star review. That helps the podcast grow. Also, you can check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review TV series such as Westworld, Taboo, Game of Thrones, and currently we're doing American Gods. You can find all the information on our website, shatontv.com. On behalf of my co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert, and Kerri Gross, I'm Gene Lyons. Be sure to join us next week for the following movie.
We get the best of both worlds. The fastest reflexes modern technology has to offer, onboard computer-assisted memory, and a lifetime of on-the-street law enforcement programming. It is my great pleasure to present to you RoboCop. This guy's really good.
He's not a guy, he's a machine.
All Detroit has a cancer. Cancer is crime.
Let the woman go. You are under arrest.
You better back up, pal!
Your move, creep.
What are your prime directives?
You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to an attorney.
What is this shit?
Anything you say may be used against you.
He's a cyborg, you idiot. He recorded every word you said.
You're dead. We killed you.
His memory's admissible as evidence. You're gonna have to kill it. Get in the car, for God's sake!
RoboCop, the future of law enforcement.
Is Kerri frozen for you, Big D?
She goes back and forth. Yeah, she's frozen now. Now she's
been
good.
doing this.
Oh my God, take a screenshot. Take a screenshot.
This is a photo. I've got it.
Isn't it like a Sade cover?
No, seriously, if I've been acting weird for the last... She's been doing this for 10 minutes. And I'm like, what the fuck did I say?
Oh, if that isn't a more accurate depiction of me as a person.
That's perfect.
I'm not feeling good.